Well, in this next part of his essay, Chatterjee tries to explain the task that or exercise that he is going to carry out. Means that there will be a problem, there will be perception or the criticism on his approach. Means certain scholars, certain critics may think that there are limits to the supposed universality of the modern regime of power. Okay, means you cannot claim it as universal. The modern regime of power, for example, the Western or American idea of nationhood, cannot be accepted as the only model, the modular form. So that can be the issue. And with it of the post-enlightenment disciplines of knowledge, there have been different knowledge, post-structuralism or what we call post-colonialism, different disciplines we are familiar with have emerged with it. So it might appear as though this exercise is meant to emphasize once more an Indian or Oriental exceptionalism. Means other scholars, the Western scholars, may think that this is the post-colonial perspective. And the scholar, the writer, Chatterjee, Partha Chatterjee, trying to emphasize, underline the Indian exceptionalism or the Oriental exceptionalism. That may be an impression by the critics. They may criticize the limitations of this project. Further, he says, the objective of my exercise is rather more complicated. It is not that simple. I'm not simply talking about the Indian or an Oriental exceptionalism. My project is not that simple. It is rather ambiguous, more complicated. Ambiguous means, you might be knowing, ambiguity means double meaning is there. It includes not only an identification of discursive conditions that make such theories of Indian exceptionalism possible, but also a demonstration that the alleged exceptions actually inhere as forcibly suppressed elements even in the supposedly universal forms of the modern regime of power. Okay, now what we understand here is that Partha Chatterjee's project in the sense, his attempt to declaim the so-called universal application of the Western theory may be criticized. But what he says, my exercise here is not that simple. It's rather ambiguous. So what does he do here? What he's trying to do here? His particular attempt, exercise, includes two things. One is an identification of discursive conditions that make such theories of Indian exceptionalism possible. First of all, he thinks that there are different theories that are emerging which focus on Indian exceptionalism, and it is possible. And the other one is that he's trying to demonstrate that the alleged exceptions actually inhere. These exceptions means certain Western scholars may think that Indians always talk about exceptionalism. But he said that there are certain conditions, and these conditions are responsible for the emergence of such theories of Indian exceptionalism. These kind of theories are possible, but at the same time, actually, he thinks that this is allegation. It demonstrates that the alleged exception actually inhere. It is natural. Exceptions, although they discard them, although they do not accept them, they inhere. as forcibly suppressed elements, even in the supposedly universal forms of the modern regime of power. So what he says, it's not only in India, it is elsewhere as well. These suppressed force means these kind of exceptions are there as suppressed elements. For example, in the US, you might be knowing there was a different historiography of the black movement, black people, or in UK as well. There can be certain groups of people. These are suppressed elements. Means it is not only applicable to India, it cannot be discarded. These theories cannot be discarded as Indian theories of Indian exceptionalism. Means India is not only India is an exception, but there are many other countries universally in the world, in the modern regime of power means in Europe and America, which have these kind of suppressed elements. The Western media focuses only on what we call India's problem with Kashmir and other groups and all. But there are many groups in other countries as well. They've been suppressed by the state. Okay, this modern regime of power. He says, therefore, whatever he is trying to explain, demonstrate here, is equally applicable to this modern regime of power. So the latter demonstration is the second one, the suppress elements. Now, if you talk about USA, I told you, I gave the example of the Negroes over there, or what happened in Germany with the Jews over there, what happened in UK. Now, there was an Irish movement, Scottish movements, Scotland, Scottish people also fought against the Britishers. There are numerous examples. These are called suppress elements. So the latter demonstration means these kind of suppressed elements enables us to think the argument that the universalist claims of modern Western social philosophy are themselves limited by the contingencies of global power. So these elements, these demonstrations help us think, enable means here help us think, to help us to make the argument. We can argue based on that you cannot have universalist modern Western social philosophy. Means your philosophy, Western philosophy regarding modernity, nationhood is not applicable everywhere. It is limited by the contingencies. Contingencies means the occasional aspects of global power. There can be certain occasional happenings, events in these global powers. So, in other words, he says Western universalism, no less than Oriental exceptionalism, can be shown to be only a particular form of a richer, more diverse, and differentiated conceptualization of a new universal idea. So, as they criticize West Oriental exceptionalism, same is the case of Western universalism. Means whatever is West is the best, or whatever is West is applicable to the rest. So this approach is resented by Partha Chatterjee here. So he says it is just like if you think that what we say, what our theoretical perception is an Indian exceptionalism or Oriental at large. Oriental in a sense, the Marathi word for Oriental is Purvatya, from the East. East is Asia. Means Asia in general is known as the East. So the world is divided into the East and West. So whatever is West means whatever is being talked in Europe or by European powers or the America, that is considered to be universal. And when it comes to the other countries, they say that can be an exception. So that is Oriental exceptionalism. But both, he says, can be shown to be only a particular form of a richer, more diverse, and differentiated conceptualization of a new and universal idea. Both are equally applicable, equally diff, the forms of understanding the concept of universe. You cannot reject Oriental idea, just as Oriental exceptionalism. And if when we think like that, it will allow us the possibility not only think of new forms of the modern community, which, as I argue, the nationalist experience in Asia and Africa has done from its birth. And when we accept this, then only you will accept the fact that the new forms of the modern community, modern community is not simply an imagined community. There are different forms, as it happened in the nationalism of Asia and Africa from its beginning, from its birth, but much more decisively to think of new forms of the modern state. So that will give us open-mindedness. We can talk about pluralistic views on nationalism. So he's rejecting the Western ideology, the Western notion of or conceptualization of nationalism. He thinks that there can be different experiences. So the project is then to claim for us, the once colonialized, our freedom of imagination. This is a sharp summary of this essay. If you understand this statement, you will realize what we have been talking about all this time. So once we accept, so I've written this particular essay to claim for us the once colonialized, means once it was ruled by the Western people, Western colonial powers. Our freedom of imagination means, do you understand it? We got physical freedom, physical independence in the year 1947, for example, India. But we were not freed on the level of thinking. Our thoughts were being controlled by their Western ideologies. Therefore, he's trying to claim freedom of imagination. What you think cannot be our thinking. You should not think that what you think is our thinking. Okay, so we too have our own freedom of imagination. So claims can be made only as contestations in the period of power. Whatever claims we made, they are only contestations, oppositions. Now let's take the example of India in general. When we talk about the ideology of BJP and the ideology of Congress, so you realize, means what BJP thinks may not be the same like Congress, and what Congress thinks may not be the ideology of BJP. Okay, so therefore there are two different parties. We need to understand. So studies will necessarily bear on each specific disciplinary field the imprint of an unresolved contest. And this contest will remain over there. It will not be resolved soon. It will be there forever. So to make a claim on behalf of the fragment is also to produce a discourse that itself fragmentary. That is itself fragmentary. So when we talk about a particular group of people, then you have created your own discourse, your own narrative. So it is redundant to make apologies for this. Therefore, he says we can't apologize because every group, every fragment has its own freedom of imagination, and every group can claim something or something, and it can become a discourse, a fragmented discourse at least. So there is no need to feel sorry for it. That's what he says in the end of this essay.